Hey guys, my name is Moon and welcome back for more Witch on the Holy Night. So last episode we had, I guess, the conversation between Aoko and Sojiro about Toko coming into the mansion, right? Aoko was talking about her, what do you call this? Her family, the Ozaki family, all that stuff, legacy, heir, successor. And we also did some wonderful world of deploys. It was quite fun. So let us continue as we're gonna start a new chapter today. Chapter, what is it? Like chapter 9? 10? I think 10, right? We'll see. 9 or 10? 10, okay. Chapter 10, Howling. This everyday tale started like any other. The peaceful days. But yeah, it feels like a calm before the storm. The morning sun alerted Sojiro that a day of work lay ahead. Specifically, the gardens needed tending to, and an unkept garden made for an unhappy Sojiro. Luckily, today was his day off from all his part-time jobs. It was the perfect opportunity to get his hands dirty. There was one problem though. However, the mansion's grounds were vast. Not only had the courtyard been left to run wild, but the area around the front door had been neglected too. To tend to these problems thoroughly, he would have to work on them week in, week out.
よし、まずは地ならしたな。
In an ideal world, his task would only take a day, but for its enormity? For the moment, Sojiro decided to set foot into the mansion's wilderness and evict the weeds. Wasting none of the early light, he started tackling the ones around the mansion. By his estimation, he could clear the forecourt courtyard and backward and then take a small rest. Is that okay? I mean, does Alice approve of this?
さあ、草摘みが趣味ってわけじゃなさそうだけど。
It was just before noon in the sunroom. Alice had come down, a book in hand, to find Aoko sitting down with a fashion magazine and elegantly sipping tea. Through the window, she could see the crouched figure of Sojiro shuffling by.
朝からやってるみたいよ。起きてカーテンを開けたら、もうあの格好でスパスパやってたから。ついでに焼却炉の掃除も言いつけといたけど、いいでしょ？いいけど、頑張るのね彼。外はあんなにも寒いのに。
Alice quietly sat down. Her teacup had been placed on the table for her. She poured herself some tea and proceeded to open her book. The two sat, passing the time in silence. Having happened to have the same idea, a nice relaxing cup of tea in the sunroom. With their evening roles decided, there was no need for idle chatter. Aoko stared out of the window interminably, turning her gaze to her magazine. Alice was immersed in a book on rune magecraft, occasionally tilting her head up as if to recall something. As if unspoken agreement in unison, they pressed their teacups together, lips and glanced outside. To the two girls, Sojiro appeared as if he were an animal in a zoo. Neither was interested in lending a hand. Okay. Despite his sluggish movement, he was making good progress. As Aoko's attention turned back to the sunroom, her eyes met Alice's. Alice returned her gaze to her book, though moments later she raised her head again. She's looking again. Are they actually gonna show us it being cleaned? There's a lot of trash bags. Look at that. Oh, it's actually changing though. You see that? Wow, it was actually changing. No, you could see that there was a path now. Clearing her throat, she attempted to focus on reading. It was no surprise that Alice admired Sojiro's diligence. Not even 30 minutes had passed before he had cleared the courtyard of its unsightly weeds. Yeah, look at that now. Wow. Without stopping once, the mysterious gardener left the courtyard puffing clouds of white breath. The area he left behind was spotless.
プロかしらね、あいつ。
Alice muttered after scanning over his work. A stalwart Sojiro worked confidently and ceaselessly. She was impressed like she was watching a scene from a great movie, but before long, she grew irked. Why would he waste his energy like that? She thought. Alice looked at the clock.
焼却炉。今から手入れをしたら夕方ね。そっちはもう終わってるわ。朝、上から見てたもの。壊されちゃいけないからあれこれ指示出してね。いやー、窓開けて散々怒鳴ったから部屋が冷えること冷えること。
It was safe to assume Aoko had come to the sunroom to escape her cold room. Between barking orders from a window and cleaning in the cold, it was clear who had the harder job.
しずきくん、何か言ってこなかった？言ってたけど、よく聞こえなかったわ。
In other words, his complaints fell on deaf ears. Look at Alice's eyes. With nothing else to discuss, the two resumed their reading. The ever so tense silence was broken by Sojiro entering the house after finishing his cleaning. He stared at the two of them, displeased.
あったかそうだね、青崎。
外よりは幾分ね。廊下の気温は外とあまり変わらないけど。それでどうして庭の掃除なんて始めたのよ、宗十郎。
Sojiro's subtle jibe had failed to find its target. He had no chance of winning, and so just hung his shoulders in defeat.
今日は本当に寒い。明日あたり雪でも降ってくるだろうから、外の掃除は早くに済ませたかったのに。焼却炉は予定外だったぞ。
He sounded resentful, but his problem was not with the additional work. If anything, he was glad to do it. What he did not care for was how nobody even bothered to lend a hand. I mean, do you think they would lend a hand? Did you see the house, how full of weeds it was, right? So if they didn't do it back then, they're not gonna do it right now.
いいじゃない。焼却炉はみんな使うんだから。じゃ、その首相な心がけついでに2階の廊下に掃除機かけといてね。それと裏庭のブナの添え木壊れかけてたでしょ。工具箱はあんたの部屋に置きっぱなしだからそれを使うこと。で、全部終わったら私の部屋に来てくれる？いらないものまとめておくから焼却炉で焼いておいて。
Hence why she made him clean the incinerator. Cruel but clever.
それで青崎、君は何をするんだ？
そうね、やることもないしギターにでも触ってようかしら。
Aoko thought hard about how to spend her afternoon, yet the thought of cleaning did not cross her mind, as he had always been the case. No, it was not out of spite that she did not think to help clean. It was because the word cleaning was not in her vocabulary. Sojiro knew exactly why the mansion was in a state it was in. Still, that did not change the fact that the corridor upstairs was very long. And Aoko was not lying about how cold it was inside. It was not much different than outside.
そうか。あくまで掃除をする気はないんだな、尾崎。まあ、掃除はしたいからするけど、こう、なんだろう。一緒に住んでる人間をそこまでこき使って両親は痛まないか。それとも割と気づいてはいたけど両親そのものがないのか。
As usual, he might have gone too far. His remarks had hit too close to home. Aoko closed her magazine and turned to face him. Infuriated, she glared her sharp blue eyes piercing into him. Sojiro knew he had not said anything unjust, but he always backed down first.
宗十郎、何度も言うようだけど。
はい。
He replied automatically, straightening his back in response to Aoko's cold, calm tone.
勘違いはしないで。私たちはあんたを同居させてあげてるんじゃない。これ以上ないって譲歩の末、仕方なく飼ってあげてるだけなんだからね。
Aoko did not mince her words. Sojiro nodded in defeat.
そうか。飼ってもらってるのか。
そう。番犬にもならないだろうけど。
Not a very useful one. Come on. Aoko responded, already tired of the conversation. While Sojiro had a little room to counter, he still cried.
しかし一方、番犬は間違っても自分の食いぶちを入れたり、天津さえ家賃を払ったりしないのも事実であった。
True. Tell them, Sojiro.
なんか言った？
いや、負け犬の遠吠えを少しばかり。
He raised his hands dismissively, knowing he could not win. To Aoko's ears, his attempt at self-depreciation sounded fascist?
宗十郎、あんた、本当にわかってる？
そうだな。君たちがどうあっても掃除をする気がないぐらいは、なんとか。
Aoko grinned at her pet's obedience. As long as she knew his place, that was all that mattered to her. She seemed to be extremely satisfied with his response.
余裕あるんだ、しずきくんってば。
Oh, what is that? Her playful smile darkened, as did Sojiro's expression. Oh!
青崎、なんだか息ができないんだけど。
So she enchanted that collar.
このまま放っておくと、そんなことも言ってられなくなるんだけど、試してみる？
He shook his head, his expression growing more and more grim.
懸命ね。私も窒息したいなんて見たくないもの。
The grating sound subsided. Sojiro gingerly touched his throat. The collar that had suddenly tightened around his neck returned to its normal size.
気管が塞がれた時の苦しさを知らないんだろう、青崎は。本当に抵抗できなくなるんだぞ、あれは。
だからそのための首輪だって言ったでしょ？今まで実践したことなかったし、あんたは相変わらず危機感ないし、ここらで一度しつけておいたの。それより掃除、急がないと日が暮れるんじゃないの？
わかったよ。結局今日はこうなる星の運びだったんだ。
Sojiro left the sunroom, his shoulders slumped and his tail between his legs. Aoko watched him leave before turning to her magazine as if nothing had happened. Alice paid no attention, and none of that had anything to do with her. With Sojiro gone, the room once again fell silent. As the clock ticked on, Alice suddenly stopped flipping through her book.
ねえ、どうして彼を酷使するの？
She asked as though talking to herself. Aoko replied without so much as looking up.
別に最後には記憶を消させてもらうんだから、楽しかったら困るじゃない。
Obscure as ever, but sincere in her own way.
そう。言われてみればそうだったわね。
Alice could not believe she had forgotten about that situation. Silently, she looked up from her book and gazed outside once again. The courtyard through the window reminded her of where she had lived a decade ago. Nothing could compare to the beauty of those gardens. But if that was the case, why did the scenery make her feel nostalgic? All Sojiro had done was take care of the gardens with the goodness of his own heart. In only half a day, he had achieved so much. I mean, I guess they were pretty harsh though, right? I mean, Aoko at least is very harsh. Like Sojiro did that and... yeah, it was a Christmas Eve and the snow had started to fall. Wow, look at that, lights. Its timing was too good, as though it had waited for the day specifically. Look at that, the amount of lights. The cold, bustling main street seemed bright and vibrant under the layer of frosty white. Reindeer statues illuminated the surroundings, children danced merrily to jingle bells. People walked along the brick road, smiling broadly. These festivities, however, had not reached the mansion on the hill. Silence enveloped the isolated building. The shadow of the snow-covered woodland grew longer. Beckoning in the darkness, people returned to the warmth of their homes, knowing a bitter night lays ahead. We're back with the clock. Something had been amiss in the mansion all day. Perhaps it was the calm before the storm. I was just saying, the calm before the storm. 2 days had passed since Toko Ozaki had revealed herself. Alice and Aoko spent more and more time locked in their rooms. Mealtimes had grown noticeably quieter. With their roles decided, they were too busy with their own jobs to worry about each other. On this day, the two had been relaxing in the drawing room since morning. The mood was calm, well, mostly at least. Sojiro was fretting that tonight would be the same.
雪が明日ならよかったのに。
He aimed his words towards the girls on the sofa, despite knowing they would be ignored. Whether the snow fell today, tomorrow, or not at all, it did not affect them. The snow just meant a white Christmas. Aoko remained silent. She wasn't ignoring him per se, she just had other things on her mind. Sojiro knew this, but still cast a lonely glance around the sunroom. The courtyard he had cleaned only a few days ago was hidden by a layer of white. The falling snow would stop every so often but then resume again, as if teasing Sojiro. By the next morning, the courtyard would be a winter wonderland. Aoko and Alice sipped tea in an effort to fight the cold. In fact, that was all they were doing.
そういえば、瞳子さんの髪の色は青崎より濃かったね。あんな綺麗な赤毛は初めて見た。 短くしてるのはもったいなかったな。
Sojiro rambled on, not expecting a response. However,
短かったって姉貴の髪が？
Aoko's expression went from nonchalant to its usual sharpness.
それどういうこと？短くしてるって髪の毛のことよね？
ああ、アリスより短かったけど、それがどうしたんだ？
別に、あの人前は私より長かったってだけ。そう、あの髪を切ったのね、姉貴は。
I mean, she did say it's been a while since they seen each other, right? Aoko spoke in a grave tone, showing slight interest. Alice turned to Sojiro.
普通じゃないな。髪を切ったぐらいでどうしたんだ一体。瞳子さんの髪が短いと青崎が困るのか？
まあその通りだけど。
Okay, it actually does what?
いいわ、どうせ夜まで暇だし説明ぐらいはしてあげる。あんたがそんなこと言わなければ未知数のまま瞳子と戦う羽目になっただろうし。
Aoko knowingly glanced at Alice, her expression suggesting she was reading her. She was also likely seeking approval. Alice remained stoic as ever, her expression showing neither approval nor disapproval.
簡単に言うと、魔術師にとっては髪の毛も武器ってことよ。昔から人間の髪や目は魔術の材料になりやすいの。女の場合はことさらにね。瞳の色は多いほどいいし、髪も長いほど質がいい。髪の毛は自身と同一視しやすいし、長い年月をかけて育てられる原始的で強力な原料と思ってくれていいわ。私が髪を伸ばしてるのはまあそういうこと。手入れが大変なんだけど、そこは女だから半分趣味みたいなもんよね。
Sojiro glanced furtively at Alice, wondering if the same held true for her. Maybe Alice had cut it because it was a hassle to maintain. It sounded stupid, but then again, this was Alice. Sojiro nodded to himself.
ん？じゃあ青崎としてはいいことじゃないか。瞳子さんの髪短いんだから。
それがここに来る前に使い切ったものならいいんだけど、伸ばした髪にはいろいろと使い道があるのよ。私は瞬間的な術の強化にしか使えないけど、姉貴だったら恒久的な術の補佐に使うはず。年月と想念を蓄えた髪は魔術師の分身とも言える。そういったものをね、死んじゃった犬だの猫だのを反言させるときに与えると、術者に服従する使い魔が出来上がるの。生前魔力のなかった使い魔、例えば猫とか犬ね。これらは術者の髪を取り込んで独自の魔術回路を得る。申請することで全く違う生き物、猫の魔術師になるってこと。例えば人語を介したり人間に化けてみたりって。行動原理も変わってしまって、大抵は術者に似通った性格になるわ。そうよね、アリス。
Her last words came with a mocking smile. Alice silently ignored it.
じゃあ瞳子さんにはアリスのみたいな使い魔がいると？
そう見るのが妥当でしょうね。姉貴は20年以上伸ばし続けた髪と引き換えに強力な使い魔を用意したってことよ。
The fight at the amusement park. Just the thought of Alice Kawanji releasing a flat snark sent a shiver down Sojiro's spine. The oil of the moon had been a unique familiar out of this world.
ほら、そこ心配しない。三崎町をぶっ壊す規模の使い魔なんてありっこないから。 確かに長く歴史のある紙を使用するほど強力な使い魔が出来上がる。けど紙を使った魔術師はそれまで溜め込んできた山中のうちの一つを初めからやり直さないといけない。
One of the three pillars. What?
切った紙はまた伸ばさないといけないでしょ。使い魔を作るのは簡単だけど、そう多く従えないのはそういうことなの。
As Aoko spoke, her mood visibly improved as though she made a breakthrough.
犬とか猫か。
The tilting his head to the side, he could not imagine a world where dogs and cats were so powerful.
変ね。瞳子さんは人魚師よ。使い魔を作って自分のレベルを下げるのはどうなのかしら。
I mean, yeah, she's been using like automatons, right? So why would she use something different?
協力者がいないだけでしょ。青崎のお家騒動に人の手を借りたくないから自分だけで全部やるつもりなのよ。あ、もしかして遊園地の人形って姉貴の紙で作られたんじゃないだろうな。
Honestly, can we actually see? Where? Nah, okay. No, I was like trying to see if we can see what the puppet looked like back then, right?
確かに話に聞いた限りだと特注品ね。
And the hair of the puppet kind of looked like Ako's hair, right? Or a similar style, I mean.
呪いによる永久期間、両手のギミック、フィンの一撃、執念深さ。けど何よアリス。あの人は人形に自己を投影するような人じゃないわ。完璧な偽物なら許すけど、偽物に過ぎない偽物は容赦なく壊してきた。青子から見てその特注人形は瞳子さんと同じ力量を持っていた。まさか遠く及ばないわよ、あんなの。なら瞳子さんの髪とあの人形は別件よ。あの人が自分の魔力を分け与えたほどの使い魔があと一体はいると見るべきね。専門家としての意見。つまりその使い魔は姉貴より強い。
You think that her familiar could be stronger than my sister herself?
そうでないと意味がないわ。人手が足りないというのもあるでしょうけど、だって私たちは2人、彼女は1人だもの。同時制圧も想定済みってわけ。なるほどね。その場合どっちが強い方を引き当てても恨みっこなしよ、アリス。こと使いまであんたが遅れを取るとは思えないけど。
Alice had never been defeated by a familiar. She sighed at Aoko's overconfidence.
青子、たとえ20年間の蓄えを付与したとしてもその器が小動物では限度があるわ。あの瞳子さんが切り札になる使い魔を用意したのなら、それは。よしてよ。いくらなんでも姉貴はそこまで悪趣味じゃないわ。
Aoko and Alice stared at each other. The conversation had returned to the drawing room, but the subject matter was not for the faint of heart.
そうね。けれど人間を追い詰めるのに最も効果的な相手はやっぱり人間なのよ。瞳子さんが死者を亡者にしていなくてもそれと同格の相手がいるぐらいは覚悟しておいて。はいはい、分かったわよ。確かに天才ってやつは空気読めないから、どんな生き物の死体を用意してきても驚かないわ。
Aoko nodded reluctantly at Alice's directness. Needless to say, Sojiro was completely lost.
よくわからないけど、なんで青崎たちは死んでるってことに固執するんだ？生きてるものじゃダメなのか？
それは使い魔じゃなくて協力者でしょ。使い魔は基本術者なくしては生きられないものにしないと。それでいて優れた意志を持ち、術者の資格や盲点を補える知性もある。それが一流の使い魔の条件よ。正直な話、それだけ都合のいいやつは死から作り直すしかないってわけ。
Completely obedient and capable of compensating for their mage's weakness, Sojiro felt that a familiar was a little different than himself.
さて、姉貴は昔からルーン使いだったから戦術は予測できる。問題の切り札もどうやら使い魔らしい。自動人形もさすがにこの前で使い切っただろうし。
Aoko spoke directly to Alice, looking for confirmation. Alice nodded in agreement.
じゃあ予定通り今日で終わりにしよう。この1ヶ月好き放題やられた借りギッタンギッタンにしてあのバカ兄貴に返してやる。
バカ兄貴。Aoko clenched teeth and balled her fist. It all seemed like nothing more than sibling rivalry. In fact, that's probably all it was. Looking at Aoko, Sojiro let out a sigh of relief. With what happened with Toko and how they reacted to her visit, the atmosphere had been deathly tense. For now, though, Aoko seemed much calmer. He took comfort in the thought that perhaps the sisters would just bury the hatchet. Even if Aoko and Toko were not sisters, he would not want to see what would happen if they fought. The hands of the clock turned gently. Approaching Judgment Night, a merciless silence would soon come to mock Sojiro's complacency. Oh no. Here we go. Oh, not yet, I guess. I thought it's suddenly gonna be like, oh, Toko's here. As night appeared, two things vanished. The first was the whimsical snowfall. The second was the lights of the mansion on the top of the hill. Aoko and Alice were nowhere to be seen inside. Only Sojiro remained. It was the night of Christmas Eve. Though Aoko and Alice had yet to find Toko, they knew everything would be concluded over the course of this and the next day. Christmas comes but once a year. It was a singular time for endings and new beginnings. In Japan, the modern holiday dated back only about 100 years, and celebrated Christ's birth only in name with all its latter-day trappings. It was neither a pure homage nor corruption of the festival that inspired it. Regardless, there was a significant increase in the land's mana during festivals. Such charge distortions were a boon to a mage's craft, be it creative or destructive. Toko Aozaki sought to destroy the local sigils which gathered and properly cycled the magical energy of the land and its people. Sojiro was able to gather that much from Aoko and Alice's conversation. Toko had already claimed 3 sigils. Only 2 remained. Any further loss would signal Aoko and Alice's defeat. In order to protect the remaining ones, they had to split up. Aoko lacked power, so she would need to borrow a ploy from Alice and head to the Tokawa sigil, which boasted the greatest local energy supply. Alice would go fully equipped to the sigil in Yashirogi. Why they left Sojiro here? Free from the constraints of civilized society, magecraft is the most powerful at midnight. Oh, okay. So I guess that's why, where is it? In Fate, they always fought at night. Right? Every single time. It's always a nighttime battle. I mean, in this game as well, right? In Kitsyland, it was at night. The young witch and the apprentice mage wished each other luck before leaving the mansion. It was almost 10 at night. After the girls set out, the first 2 hours passed quickly. When Aoko was ready to head off, Sojiro walked with her to the foyer. Neither had spoken a word to each other. She had departed without showing any sign of fear. It was difficult to tell whether she did not want to get him involved or whether she did not see him a worthy ally in combat. I mean, Sojiro would do anything though in combat. He'd probably sacrifice himself, right? The thought stuck with him. He would sacrifice himself, for these two, if that ever comes to that. He let out a long sigh, not out of a dejection or frustration. It was a mechanical, emotionless breath. He sat on the near-frozen floor, staring vacantly up at the skylight. Moonlight peeked through the clouds. He imagined the moonlight bouncing off the town's powdery blanket and illuminating the night. But he would not find himself at downtown. Watching from the sidelines was his role to begin with. His roommates and he lived worlds apart. He could not keep up with them, and if he did not show the same kind of will, he would remain on the sidelines. However,
そうか。この手が必要な時はもうないのか。
Sojiro looked up at the moon. Somewhere deep inside, he felt a trickle of sadness. Veiled in white and cloaked in darkness, the park seemed like a forgotten memory. Not a soul was in sight. The night felt far more enigmatic than usual, yet the air was clean enough to drink. Though only a sliver of moonlight peered through the clouds, it lit up the entire world. In those moments, a young girl's footsteps echoed. Trampling the still, white silence under a midnight sun, the pale moon illuminated the inky blue sky. Only a few streetlights and an incongruous phone booth betrayed signs of civilization. A girl appeared dressed in black. Against a snowy landscape, the figure of Alice Kawanji was unmistakable. Pure black, deeper than even the night. Were her overcoat, gloves, and hat even, her eyes and hair. Nothing stirred for a time. Not Alice nor the white scenery. The world was still painting of a snowy field. Only time moved, gradually darkening the lights in the park and eventually the nearby homes as well. Yashirogi was more modern and developed town than Misaki. Though the park was located in the center of town, it had become a blind spot. It had been overlooked by developers and carried no commercial value. A few houses encircled the park, the street lights turned off at midnight. It was a white night, people, even machines, were fast asleep.
私が先なのね。
Alice whispered, watching the street lights slowly fade. She thought she heard a dog howling in the distance. Perhaps it was the howling of the moon. The title of this chapter is Howling, right? The howl reached deeper into the night than expected. A wolf, maybe? The phone rang. It was perhaps the first time it had hung since Sojiro moved into the mansion. Rung. Hesitantly, he picked up the receiver and brought it to his ear. He heard nothing. He felt he had to say something but could not think what. Maybe something like hello, Kawanji residence. Or maybe you've reached the Ozaki residence. While he was in deep thought, a voice as light as air came through the receiver.
Shizuki.
Sojiro could barely hear the voice, but it was definitely Alice's.
そうだけど、アリス。
No response. The silence was as profound as the night. But for the sound of a static from the receiver, after a long pause, Alice finally spoke.
青子はいる。
いや、まだ帰ってないけど。
そう。
With a click, the call ended. Soldier wondered if she had something to say but could not respond. What happened? Did we go back a little bit? Slowly they advanced, carving through the fresh snow. There were so many. Where had they all come from? Dozens of feral dogs snarled at Alice, their eyes trained at her. The snow clung to the beast's mangy fur. Their clenched fangs and bloodshot eyes hid barely rained hunger that might burst forth like a lightning at any moment. They yearned to taste her warm flesh and satiate their empty bellies. To them, the girl in black stood like a lighthouse in a stormy sea. She watched them disinterested. It appeared that the Yashirogi sigil was the key target tonight, not Tokao where Ako had gone. Oh no. Alice had always been unflappable, and the child's play before her was hardly about to change that. Her main enemies was not the dog surrounding her, but the lone mage behind them, Toko Aozaki.
ひどい趣味。ここ数年で品が落ちたの。まあ、それならそれで嬉しいけど。これが地金なら、青崎との付き合いもいよいよ白紙に戻せるわ。
Toko laughed at the acerbic taunt.
いやいや、これは不可抗力でね。安心しろアリス。間違っても私の趣味じゃない。
Crunching through the fallen snow, Toko slowly came into view. She wore a moss green coat that contrasted sharply with Alice's garb. A silk scarf warmed her neck. She stood tall, her hair short, striking a more valiant posture than any young man. After all, the two standing here needed to be less like the shining moon and more like the darkness surrounding it. The barking abated. Like servants in a royal court, they averted their eyes from their ruler, lest their eyes and hearts be plucked out.
久しぶりだね、アリス。
トウコさんもお元気そうで。
They stood about 12 feet apart. No love had been lost between them. Just two enemies, one who was to be victorious and one who was to fall.
さて、どうしようかアリス。積もる話もある。君の近況にも興味がある。そもそも今回の件についていろいろと説明したくてたまらない。5分ほど時間を割いても構わないか？
お断りよ。あなたと5分も話をしていたら、その隙に内臓まで売却されそう。
Then the following events unfolded quickly. Oh, here we go. It's again a battle, but okay, so we'll take a break here. We'll do the whole battle next episode. So yeah, episode today, Calm Before the Storm, right? And next episode, it's gonna be epic. For sure, Alice versus Toko. This is gonna be good. So anyways, we are gonna continue this and do more of Witch and the Holy Night in the next one. So I'll just see you then, guys. Bye bye.